Welcome to Tailfeather, everyone. Thank you for joining me today. I'm Nick Crutchfield from Tailfeather. We've got one of my good buddies, Arturotron, with us today, and we're going to talk about third spaces, as we usually do, and how they fit into the great equalizers and how we celebrate community together. Today, we're going to dive into the modern jungle of third spaces. This is where a community meets a neighborhood bar, and now we meet an Arturotron in a chat room full of avatars, lo-fi beats, and someone speedrunning Zelda. From Twitch to TikTok Live to that one guy who streams Mario Kart while making sourdough. I didn't even know that was a thing until I looked it up. We're asking this: where are we going to hang out now? And if so, is it going to be a third space that is non-traditional? And if I'm in a non-traditional third space, does that mean I have to make my own nachos? Welcome to the discussion, Arturo. How are you today, my friend?
It's good to see you. Yeah. Oh, fantastic. It's a beautiful Friday and I'm indoors streaming.
Yeah, it's the one day it's not going to rain this week and it's like 80 degrees and I'm like, let's do a podcast today. This is perfect. Um, I, I want the world to know who you are. If they've listened to Tailfeather at this point, they know who I am. I want the world to know who you are because of many, many different reasons, but mainly because when I think about sparks in our industry, you come to mind first. First and foremost, you are a spark, meaning that you cause conversation in a good way, whether or not that's a discussion that needs to be had or a discussion that wants to be had. You start the conversations, and you always have really good input to add to the conversation. So, can you tell the listening audience and the viewing audience, as this will be on YouTube, a little bit about yourself, about your background, and how you found yourself into hospitality?
Yeah, I'm Arturo Vera-Felicie, Arturotron Robobartender on the internets and social medias. I'm an opinionated Puerto Rican that moved to the States when he was a kid. I've always been, some would say kind of argumentative, to the point where people would say I would argue with a rock if I could because they didn't agree with me. Um, I'm a former Marine. I fell into bartending after I got out of the service, but honestly, I feel like hospitality has been my entire life because of where my culture comes from, and specifically my parents who used to host dinners, and like whenever my friends would come over, my mom would always make sure to like my parents would feed my friends to the point where they would joke that my parents were witches that were fattening them up to then eat them. uh, and
That's a great,
yeah,
great set of parents to have.
yeah. So, and part of my personality has always been about standing up for myself, and more importantly, standing up for others that I felt were helpless or powerless. When I was a kid, people tried to bully me in the cafeteria, and I learned real quickly that the only way to stop bullies is to stand up for yourself, however that may seem. And the idea of standing up for others is actually why I joined the military. Was the idea, the belief that whether it's ideologic or not, that the U.S. was the anti-bully. And so I'm very passionate about what people would use the term social justice as a pejorative. I wear it as a badge of honor because I believe in human rights, and I believe in civil rights, and I believe in diversity and equity, and are core to the American dream. And yeah, I'm very loud about it on the internet, sometimes to others' chagrin.
Well, the other chagrin is their own past traumas creeping up on them and writing their narrative for them. I like that you write your own narrative, and I love that you've seen hospitality in yourself through your whole life. Before we get into the fun questions, I do have one that you said you're a former service member. You went into it because of some very particular things, specific things, not particular things. Words matter. Um, how did you find your way from the service to bartending? This is something that I think about a lot because my formidable years, if you want to call them that, were in Norfolk, Virginia, which is, as you know, NES Oceana, the biggest naval base in the world, home to many Marine outposts, many naval outposts, Air Force, Army, all of it, Coast Guard. Hell, there's even Space Force there now, whatever that is. So, and yes, Paul, I know you're going to email me. I know we're going to have a talk about Space Force. I know you're in Space Force. We can talk about that at some other time. So what was the transition like from service member to bartender? I've hired a lot of former service members at different bars through the Mid Atlantic, and I want to get your take on that transition.
Well, actually, it happened earlier than most people because a good portion of my military career was in the active reserves. I did
Oh,
have, I don't know, about 2 years or so active duty through deployments attached to Second Marines out of Lejeune. But a good portion of my contract was while I was in college. And when I kind of dropped out of university and started going to community college, I got a job at a sandwich shop in Lawrence, Kansas called Yellow Sub. I was a delivery driver, but at that point, at some point I would have to jump on the line. I would do prep. I would work the register. At some point, I had a buddy of mine. I was looking for more work, and he hired me in the kitchen to be a prep cook, line cook, dishwasher. And then when school started, he kind of had to lay me off because my hours changed, but the staff liked me, the boss liked me, and they gave me an opportunity to be a bar back. And, as old school bartending goes, I went from bar back to satellite bartender to bartender. So when I left the service after my last tour, I moved to Westport in Kansas City, Missouri, and a couple of my roommates worked at a dive bar called Buzzard Beach, and it was a really easy transition to go from, um, you know, combat duty to working security at a dive bar. And from there, when you do a good job, people recognize it. So I went from uh, door guy to head door guy, code head door guy, to bar backing and having shifts. And then I just got a restaurant gig trying to make more money, starting again, door guy, server, bar back, bartender. But that was when I got my first taste of corporate restaurant training. And at some point, I got a job at a burger joint as an opening bartender for a place that was opening in the early 2000s, right when the burger and beer craze was happening. And that was when I started getting my first hospitality mentors. And that's really where I kind of realized that bartending wasn't just a job to make money, that it could be not just a career, but an honored profession. And that the industry of hospitality was more than just making drinks and making tips. It was about making people feel welcome and making people feel seen. And that really it was very easy for me to transition my passions into that. I'm also kind of an academic, so learning about beer categories or wine or craft cocktails kind of opened up that nerd need that I have to educate myself. So it's all kind of like kismet stuff happening. And you always take that some. I always say that everything you do, you gain a little bit of experience and you put it into the next thing. So yeah, that was my hospitality origin story.
right on. I dig it very much. I love that you went through those cycles in the early aughts that most of us did at some point, right? You touched the door, you probably touched Carmanger at some point. You were definitely in a dish pit doing something at some point. And you didn't expect to go from bar back to bartender to bar director or bar manager or whatever in 3 months. Like that wasn't a thing. It took a long time, a lot of exposure, and you had to know your ins and outs fully. And I think that kind of takes us to where we are now, because that evolution took about 14 or 15 years, and then wham, the pandemic happens. Wham, half of our industry transitions over to real estate and insurance, which that's great. And then the other
Or some
half has
like weird
stayed.
techno cults. I don't know, man. It's weird on social
Yeah,
media right now with some of our peers.
it, a little bit. It's let's just say a lot of bit. It's getting stranger and stranger each day, and I think that's the pent up anxiety that we're all feeling right now, and not understanding how to um, constructively dissipate the anxieties. It's not an easy thing to do for sure. Um, but we're talking also about the evolution of the space, right? Because like way back in the early aughts, and some of you listening may not have even been born yet back then. Holy shit, I'm old. Um, we had traditional taverns. We had traditional nightclubs like Dream in DC or the Electric Factory in Philly, and all these crazy um, drug induced all night dance parties, and it was quite the scene back then. And from what I hear, that's rebirthing in certain cities and over in Europe, which is kind of crazy. I stayed next to a rave when I was in Germany unknowingly. Never do that to yourself, ever, especially in Germany, because they start at 10 and they don't stop till about 8 in the morning. It is nuts. But then we saw it kind of transition into cocktail rooms and the speakeasies. I still have trouble with that word, but or phrase, but it is what it is. And then we get over to these food hall experiences, which I think are really cool still. I don't know, maybe I'm just getting some boomer vibes off of that, but I still love food halls. I like being able to kind of sample around different things and have a couple of bars in there to check out. And then we get up into the recycling of everything, because I think we're in that circular atmosphere right now. We're kind of coming around. However, there's an offshoot, and the offshoot are these digital third spaces. Once upon a time, the third space was your local dive bar. It was that cafe with the mismatched chairs. And now we're looking at things like Twitch. When did we collectively decide that our social lives would come with these mods and donation alerts?
So that's a really interesting question. And before I want to redefine our terms, and you did pretty well talk about what the third space is, where first place is home, second place is work, and third place is where we come together and spend our time. They're anchors of the community. I'm reading the description definition.
Yeah.
Anchors of community life facilitate and foster broader and more correct creative interactions. The sociologist that created this term in a book called The Great Good Place, he has some like definitions of what makes
Mm-hmm.
a third place, including that it's open and inviting, comfortable and informal, convenient, unpretentious. There are regulars, conversations and main activity is the main activity, and laughter is frequent. I would actually go a little bit more basic, and I would basically say a third place is where we congregate, make connections, and form memories. And when you think
Mm-hmm.
about it, that's what bars are. But to your question, how did we get here? It's a very long story, and it doesn't start with the pandemic, even though it might seem like the pandemic is where it hit critical mass. But there's a lot
Mm-hmm.
of things happening. The two biggest are the democratization of technology. Basically, we went from computers being big servers in government buildings and corporate offices to a cell phone that has more power than my first 383 word processor. Right? Like this is a
Right.
supercomputer for all intents and
It's like
purposes.
10
The
rooms
democratization
worth of
of the internet.
computers. Yeah.
Yeah. When I was a kid, my dad worked for the government, so he had a pretty good, steady job. So we
Mm.
had a good house in the suburbs, and we were one of the first houses to have a home computer, but also a modem that you plugged into your phone line, and you had to buy a second phone line to literally dial up to a thing called the internet using a third-party service like America Online, AOL. And now you don't even need internet service because you have a phone probably that can connect you to the quote unquote information superhighway. And that's the first thing. Like technology evolves and it becomes
Mm-hmm.
more commonplace. Second is generational. You and I think we're similar ages for what I call the Star Wars generation. It's
Yeah.
1977 to 1983. We're kind of a cusp between Gen X and millennials, but
Mm-hmm.
we have aspects of Gen X, we have aspects of millennials, but more importantly, we were born in an analog world. And at a very young age, we started adopting digital, right? But then
Mm-hmm.
you get to millennials. They kind of started and even closer to that digital age. You talk about the generation, I think there's Zennials. They were born
Mm-hmm.
in the digital age. So as you have more generations born into this technology, and those generations are larger than the next one, you get a showcase. Back when I was a kid, it was an idea that only nerds read comic books and played video games. Now everyone is a nerd that plays video games. When I was in college, only the nerds had gaming PCs. Now everything is a gaming PC and everyone has a Steam account. It's been kind of wild as a gamer to see that evolution from console to gaming. But when we had digital spaces, I think it started even before we talk about computers. Games in general in ancient human history were where we gather. And we talk about
Mm-hmm.
games in sports, which are games of strength, endurance, speed, and agility. But there are also games of strategy and games of chance. So we're talking board games like chess. We're talking card games and dice games. And that was always a part of our community, whether you call a third place the gaming hall in a Roman village, or I come from the Caribbean. I'm Puerto Riqueño. So we have what we call the cookout. In the black community, maybe they're playing spades. In my community, it's the old heads playing dominoes. And that became a gathering place for people. We start getting board games that are much more intricate, where people are replicating like Napoleonic wars with little miniatures. And that is the evolution of the tabletop RPG. Chainmail is a rule set where you're playing a war game up here, but your special characters are underground exploring dungeons. That became Dungeons and Dragons. And suddenly now we have another avenue for people to gather at a table and share stories. And a lot of times this happens in a home, a first place. But is that game setting, that game world you're creating, is that not an imaginary third place? And then we get to video games. We think about video games as a very solitary experience. It's this nerd in his parents' basement playing his games, Cheeto dust everywhere. Shout out to Greg Miller. But it's not that. My first video game experience with a home console was at my cousin's house, and he was playing Russian Attack on his Nintendo Entertainment System. And he just handed me the controller, and we went back and forth, life to life. So that's not a solitary, that was a single player game that was a shared experience, right? When we start getting into the internet era, that's when you're starting to get digital third places within the internet. You're talking chat rooms, you're talking early first-person shooter online multiplayer, you're talking MUDs, multiple online user dungeons, which are text-based third places where you're adventuring with people. Then you have the proto MMOs, where you're going onto a video game online and meeting people. Sometimes they're strangers, but you're creating bonds, you're creating friendships. You're going online into deathmatch, and now you have the creation of communities online. In MMOs, you had guilds. First-person shooters, you had clans. And these were like large organizations sometimes that had hundreds of members that were playing multiple games. But they were also coming together in shared places, usually on websites, on BBS boards, message boards, chat rooms. Early days, we didn't have Discord. We had something called IRC, Internet Relay Chat, I think is what it's called.
Yeah, I remember
You have the advent of MMOs. My first MMO was a proto MMO called Neverwinter Nights on AOL, and it was taking this single player computer D&D RPG game for the computer and using that engine to create an online game where you meet people. And I remember I met some people, two guys saved me from some monsters, and one of them, his online handle was Doctor Who, and I was a Doctor Who fan when I was in junior high, and like we became friends, and he invited me to his guild, and suddenly I'm following these people I've never met in real life. Game to game, we went to Dark Sun Online, then we went to the granddad of modern MMOs, Ultima Online, and I brought a book because we talk about third place as a place to make memories. This is a book about Ultima Online, and it's about the oral history of Ultima Online and the emergent storytelling that happens when you gather people together to share a space. And these are people telling stories of love, of drama, of conflict, of stories that are like legendary. When Ultima Online became when it went gold and they went live, the beta test at the end, and that last day, the maker of the game, whose online avatar was Lord British, a guy named Richard Gary, a very interesting guy, but he was giving a speech in the capital of Britannia, and it was this big moment. All these players were gathered. It was going to be a momentous occasion, and some guy found like a loophole in the programming, and he assassinated Lord British live. Something that should not be possible. And that man became an internet legend, right? And it's a crazy story. This guy found a loophole to kill not just someone that was impossible to kill, it was literally the creator of the game. And those types of stories are what we do at bars, right? That's why I talk about congregating, making connections, and telling stories. But now that we have this, the advent of social media, suddenly those third places became more organic to our day-to-day use. You also have these weird digital third places that we didn't think about. There's a game called Second Life, and it's not really a game. It was literally a digital world. Think like Ready Player One or what Facebook is trying to do with Meta. And it was when I first learned about it, it was weird. Wait, you're not going dungeon crawling and fighting monsters. You're just creating weird little guys and doing like interacting with people and like creating your own stories. At first I couldn't understand that, but that was kind of a virtual reality within the digital space. And you're right that during the pandemic, I think it became much more apparent that we could have these third places online, and more people were going on Discord and Zoom to have movie nights together. The idea of a third place in a digital form is actually a new theory of third place that people are talking about. Because just because you're in your living room or you're in your office, you're still logging into a third place. So that's kind of how we got here: is evolution, democratization of technology, and generational shifts in culture.
Yeah, you just brought up a couple of things through my memory bank, if you will, my hard drive. Um, One, I remember dating a lady way like my early college years, and her little brother was constantly in a chat room. Every time we were, down in the basement watching, they had their traditional like family room where everyone was, and they had the basement room where the little brother and the TV lived essentially. And he was always on his computer playing this game with other people. I didn't understand it at the time, and he had this amazing massive community that he joined every night 7 o'clock. He was allowed on it from 7 to 8:30, and he used that 90 minutes every day to connect with people and play these games through text. I didn't understand it until just now fully. And then I think about my brother, who is special needs. I love him. He is an amazing human being, and he has mobility issues, so he doesn't get out of his house too often. And his community is his Call of Duty community and his church.
Mm-hmm.
And those are really his two main communities. And I'd never taken into consideration until just now how important that community can be for connection and for being able to talk to friends that are in. He's like, yeah, my friend in Alabama. I'm like, how the hell do you know somebody in Alabama? Oh, my friend over in Alaska. I'm like, Andy, you don't leave your house. How do you know people in Alaska? And he's telling me about all these Call of Duty things. And I was just like, oh, click. Now I get it. Now I totally get it. And I'm a nerd. I should have known this. But
So, two quick things. I mean, there are stories of people meeting on World of Warcraft and getting married in game and then married in real life,
are you
like
serious?
starting a relationship digitally. Like right now, we use like Tinder or oh my God, what's the Christian one? Any fish in the sea or whatever.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, people would meet. I wish I would have looked this up because there was an article that came out a couple years ago about this kid. I think he lived maybe in Europe, maybe England, and his parents thought he was really lonely, didn't have a lot of friends, spent a lot of time in his room. Turns out he was a massive MMO player. And he passed away of some medical stuff. And when his online community found out, this guy apparently was legendary in that gaming space because he's one of those guys that was constantly helping new players, constantly a part of the community, and people really looked up to him. And when he passed, his parents thought he was just this lonely nerd that had no friends. Turns out he had thousands of friends that weren't just giving memorials online. They came to his funeral, and his parents were shocked to the point where they were crying because they didn't realize. I'm tearing up a little bit. They didn't realize that
Same.
his son had such an impact on people that they would have thought were strangers. But these people
Yeah.
came from everywhere just to pay respect for someone that they had connected with. And that's a lot of times when what we call normies don't really understand about the digital third space is that you can make lifelong connections, lifelong friendships. You can meet mentors. One of the Discord gaming groups I'm in, I'm kind of one of the older dudes, and I'm
Mhm.
realizing that I've become a mentor to some of the younger guys, and they call me sensei and teacher because I'm giving them bits of wisdom, and letting them know definitions of terms they've never come across. And that was a weird thing. And right now we're talking about like the lonely male issue and the young men that are being red pilled. And I really took that as a responsibility that, online I am providing a good male role model to these guys. I don't know how many times I've told nerds like, oh, how do you have a girlfriend, Arturo? You're such a nerd. And I'm like, hey guys, have you tried having a conversation and getting to know someone without any sort of like um um what's the word I'm looking for? Like you're not trying to just hook up, just like make a connection, get to know someone, like make someone laugh, and then maybe something if it doesn't, that's great, move on. If it does, that's magical. And
Mhm.
like I think these digital third spaces are important for our society. And it's really hard to think about the internet when it first came. We thought it was this magical thing. It was the information superhighway, and the internet
Yeah.
was going to connect us more than ever and make us more informed than ever. But now there's a dark side to the internet. that also makes us more separate and divided, and also
Mhm.
spreads a lot of mis and disinformation. And it's up to the good players to fight the bad players. And that kind of makes me think of MMOs, because in MMOs you have, like, especially early MMOs, there were no separate servers. It was the Wild West, and you had these guys that were griefers. They got off on making other people's times not fun. Player killers. They were basically
Yeah,
serial killers
yeah.
that would go around murdering new guys. But then you had
Yeah.
an advent of players that were player killers, and they became like rangers and knight errants that would travel the world protecting the innocent and the young from these predators. And you have this very interesting culture that created out of that. And I think that's kind of evolved now into streaming and social media. And it's up to us, the good players, to like be positive role models. Sorry to go on
Right
a
on.
little rant.
No, I love it. I love the fact that there are people that are jumping into this and trying to, I guess, tamper down the bullying quite a bit. I guess that maybe that can be considered bullying. I couldn't get into GTA in those games. The sandbox games, typically for me, with the exception of, I wouldn't consider Destiny sandbox. I mean, it's too mission driven to me. Um, but the sandbox games are just way too open for me. There's no parameters really, and I get lost in them. And honestly, I don't have the attention span for it. I think that's why things like Mario Kart and Destiny 2 and those types of games are better suited for the way my brain works. If you were to walk into a Scottish tavern in, let's say, Edinburgh, we'll say 15 years ago, it might have looked like it did in the late 90s. And they've probably updated it a little bit, but it kind of still looks like it did in the late 90s. If you were to walk into a place like, let's say, a group that has an established bar, an established cocktail bar, and now they're creating a third branch in their business, the aesthetic from the first bar that carried over to the second bar is going to be very different than the aesthetic carries from the second bar to the third bar. So the evolution of sound, of sight, of light, of aromatics, like the whole thing changes, because I think Consortium Holdings in San Diego is a pretty good example of how the aesthetic evolves. Like their newest place up in North Park is insane. It's got trees on the inside. It's beautiful. But the aesthetic is still there, but it's evolved quite a bit through their openings. How has the aesthetics of the third place evolved in streaming communities? Because I know that like a lot of people, and you can see them in almost any city that you go to. If you look up into apartment buildings, you'll see like the blue rope lights running through the ceiling, or you'll see like a column in the corner that has pink in it. I travel a lot, so when you stare out of a hotel room at sunset to watch the sunset, you'll see these rooms start to pop up in the buildings around you. Why is that happen? I guess is the best question that I can ask.
Well, I mean, when you think about how streaming got its start, and like now you have so many different streaming services, Twitch being a really big one. I don't mess with Kick. Kick is the bad place. That's where all the people that get kicked out of Twitch go to Kick. And if you get kicked out of Twitch,
Oh.
like, ugh, that's a yikes situation. But it really started with YouTube. And I don't know if a lot of people know this, but like essentially YouTube was created as a way for guys to find sex scenes in movies for all intents and purposes.
Are you serious?
And at some point, yeah, like a lot of our social
I
media
had no
apps had to
idea.
do with dudes trying to fuck. Like, no offense, sorry if I demonetize you, I apologize.
No,
But like
no.
when you think about social media apps, Facebook was about hookups and dating. It's really weird
Holy crap.
the evolution of social medias. But at some point, YouTube streaming became a thing, and you had people like now you have BookTube. And you said about aesthetics. I know a booktuber because his bookshelf is behind him, and it's a bragging point. If it's a tabletop streaming, they're gonna have their board games behind and their D&D books behind them, and that's gonna be like a bragging point. at least from my experience, very early on, when it comes into content creating, I'm part of a community called Kinda Funny, and Kinda Funny was started by these dudes that left IGN, which was a kind of nerd video game journalist platform, and they had this. They were kind of instrumental in creating the podcasts and YouTube streams for IGN, specifically Podcast Beyond, Game Scoop, and then they had a daily variety show. I'm forgetting. Up at noon. And these guys said it that they want to do their own thing. They wanted to be their own small independent company, and they were going to go on YouTube and do a talk show about video games and do a news show, and they were going to start a Patreon. And these guys were pretty much tip of the spear. There were maybe a couple other people that were doing that, but they kind of created that business model of content creation as a subscription model, but also free services. And that was kind of like watching their evolution go from like podcasting into a literal spare bedroom to creating a studio called the Spare Bedroom to now having a massive studio and office, which they also dubbed the Spare Bedroom. But they have like a modular studio where they can host anything they want, and their table changes, their background changes. They have a floor monitor so they can do really cool stuff with the eagle eye camera. And it's kind of like, think in terms of any sort of other media at some point. Different genres have different stylistic things that need to be in that genre. You know film noir when you see it. The same thing happened with streaming content, where you kind of had this shared language and this shared imagery. Like how many, I think you brought it up in your questions, how many streamers have those lo-fi beats in the background while they're setting up? It kind of became, like I said, a shared language. And it's usually like the people that started it are kind of the ones that set the standards, and people reiterate on that.
Man. Okay, that's kind of deep. And I don't know if the listeners totally heard that, because we talk about words matter on this podcast a lot. And sometimes it's the nonverbal auditory language that's being spoken that matters. And by setting up these lo-fi beats, you're creating a mood, you're creating a situation. But you are forming a point of connection, because if the person that enjoys that sound that's happening is going to stick around, they might start to ask questions and might open up a little bit more. We're looking at it. Another great equalizer is music, right? It's something you don't have to share a language with. But
I'll
that's a
give you
language
one
within
more. One
itself.
of the kind of funny guys, Andy Garcia, Nitro Rifle on Twitch. He does his own nightly stream of his own brand, and he does lo-fi video game theme songs. So there, he's not just setting the mood; he's letting you know what his programming is going to be. He's going to stream live games and game content, and he's telling you that by his like lobby music, for all intents and purposes. His elevator music is telling you what his show's going to be about.
That's wild, man. Like that is, we're talking about, and those of us that are in that Star Wars generation, I am in that generation, 77. There's a whole other language out there that we're unaware of, and it's not auditory, or it's not spoken, it's an auditory thing. And that's pretty damn cool. I jump back behind the bar. I'm working behind the bar 2 or 3 days a week, depending on the week right now and my travel schedule. And one of the reasons I did that is I figured out that one, in order for me to consult with brands and do this on an authentic manner, I have to understand today's bartender better, because yes, all bartenders are kind of the same, but we're also not. This new generation is more kind to each other than I've ever seen. They also just don't give a shit about a lot of things that we did give a shit about, which is both liberating and troublesome at the same time. But I also love
very
that they won't
kill your darlings, very like iconoclast. They don't care about the legacy or the originators. They just want to know what to do now. I make a joke that every bartender wishes they were a chef and thinks they're a DJ. And a lot of times we forget the power of music when it comes to creating vibes and defining your space. And like I have a chef buddy, and we talk about, I have a concept I want to do that's Puerto Rican, and he's like, Arturo, we don't have to listen to reggaeton every night, do we? I'm like, no, man, but we also can't be listening to like punk rock every night. Like we have to, if we're going to open up a place that makes you feel like you're in La Placita in Santurce, in San Juan, then you need to create that atmosphere with aroma, with music, with aesthetics, and you create this energy. And I've proven that because I made a playlist, and I will do events, and I will play this Latin American, mostly Caribbean playlist, and the vibes, people feel it. I was working at my buddy's natural wine bar, which sadly had to close recently, but I had a family come in, 3 generations, grandfather, parents, and college kids. They were all of age. And the moms basically said, "Oh, this feels like our vacation in Puerto Rico." And I was like this very lovely white lady just said one of the nicest things, one of the nicest compliments I've ever gotten as a bartender, and had nothing to do with my cocktail or my wine knowledge. Everything to do with my hospitality and my playlist, and that was awesome.
What's the old saying again, Arturo? The drinks are what percent of what we actually do?
Oh man, like I don't know what the percentage would be, but it's just like, who cares, man? Like
Right, right.
my concept, I've focused more on the food than the drinks, because the drinks are easy, and also I just drink a daiquiri and shut up.
Yeah,
I don't.
it's cold. It's good.
I've done it.
Get
I've
it
done
down.
the micro local, house made everything, reinvent the wheel, and I'm just tired. I have wheels at
Yeah,
home. I don't have to make
yeah.
new ones.
Um, so let's go a little further past music. Let's look back in the day. Um, our spaces may have had a jukebox. I think that's pretty important for the neighborhood style bar. Again, we're getting into styles of bar here, and sometimes a pinball machine, which I don't know of a better bar game than a really good pinball machine. Honestly, maybe it's maybe it's nostalgia for me, but I love pinball machines. I love being able to um, have access to the paddles and just da-da-da-da-da-da. And now they're doing the lo-fi beats that we talked about, and you're playing something like Elden Ring or what do I play all the time right now? I play Mario Kart constantly. I play Zelda. I have a Switch because I travel, so I play a lot of the Nintendo games. Um,
Did you get your Switch 2 pre-ordered?
no, not yet. And I know
I'm waiting for Christmas too. I don't have the money.
I don't I don't have the money, and I want the bugs to get out, and I don't want to get in a situation where um I get it and I'm pissed off. I got to get something physical in my hands before I'll buy it. Except for, of course, the friggin' iPhones, because God knows.
The evolution of the third place, Nintendo has always been behind the ball when it comes to their online functionality. And the
Yeah.
Switch 2 is going to be the first Nintendo system that has incorporated video voice chat, which is a huge step.
Oh wow.
So you don't need that Discord group. I mean, I think it does affect frame rates, and I don't know how many people are going to use it. But yeah,
Right.
little kids will be able to like play games and see their friend's face on the TV.
Holy crap! I did not know that. Is that why they're selling the little camera thing, the fire
Yeah, that's it.
ball
That's
flower?
it's an external camera for voice, video voice chat.
Oh wow. Okay. Well, that's pretty cool. Maybe I'll get my brother, or maybe I'll give him my. It wouldn't be backwards compatible. Yeah, maybe that'll be his birthday Christmas combination present this year. We'll see. I like being able to stay in
Does
touch
that
with him and
technically make me
playing.
an influencer? I'm gonna
Yes,
bank
it
on that.
does. You just influenced my decision. You're an influencer. Welcome to the fold. Um, I do have a question about the the implications and I guess the psychology of these digital third places. Um, One of the things that I hear when I'm at the bar and I'm talking with the younger crowds, and younger meaning sub 20, we'll say sub 26, sub 27, somewhere in that range, legal drinking age 27, depending on the country that you're in. Um, I have heard a few people get kind of put off by these third places, and they're serious gamers, they're serious streamers. They occupy these spaces a lot, um, and then they have problems with people, and there's no way to kind of work it out person to person. What kind of troubles have you seen in the third space where, I heard you mention something about Kick. I am completely unaware of Kick. Um, but are we are we still creating community, or are we ghosting each other in the high res?
Yeah, I mean that goes to your questions. Maybe I won't jump to the bouncer question, but I
Yeah.
do think we are creating communities. I mean, I talked about the kind of funny community,
Hmm.
and Polygon actually did an article on one of their founders, Greg Miller, and they described the kind of funny community as like a cult, but a really really nice cult, and like it makes sense. We have shared languages, we have shared stories, we have inside jokes.
Hmm.
There's been bits like comedy bits that have been going on for years because they started I think in 2015, and now there's little sub communities within Kind of Funny. I'm part of a group called Neon Pocket Dimension. My buddy, who is a buddy now, but we met a year ago on Twitch. Watching Kind of Funny, he invited me to his Discord group. That's kind of like a sub community of Kind of Funny, and these are guys
Okay.
I've now gamed with, and I've streamed with them. They've asked me to come on streams to talk about stuff that I'm either interested or video game stuff. So we are
Yeah.
definitely creating communities within the third space, and streamers have their own communities. People meet up in real life from these. I was Kind of Funny was doing a subathon, a fundraiser for their company last year, right around fall time, and I've been more active in the community and in the chat. And someone goes, "Hey, Arturotron, did you live in Lawrence, Kansas, and a house in Ohio like 2004?" And I was like, Mike Parker? That was my college roommate. Happened to be in
Wow.
the same video game community, watching the Twitch stream, connecting my sassy ass with the name Arturo, and making that connection. And it was
Wow.
a wild interaction. So yeah, we are definitely creating communities. And again, I want to go back. A lot of times I try to tell people this is not new. When we talked about the NA culture in America, I went back
Hmm.
to pre-revolutionary era when I started about talking about NA third spaces,
Hmm.
places. Same thing with the online communities. They've existed for a while. They were BBS boards. They were message boards. They were blogs. They were the IRC chats for MMOs. They were online guilds, first-person shooter clans. Um, and now the Kind of Funny. Sometimes they'll do meet and greets where if they're in a city for an event, they'll reach out to a local pub or bar and grill and tell the community, hey, if you're in town, we're going to be here at these areas. Come by, meet us up. And now you've gone from people that have connected online, they might meet in person, and then they start their own groups and their own meetups. Same thing in the tabletop community. You might be watching someone do an actual play of Daggerheart, for example, which I'll be doing later tonight. But then you might go to your local city convention and meet those people or do tournament play. So
Okay.
not just we're not only creating communities which within the digital third place, that digital community can also happen in real life as well. Um, it's just something that becomes organic.
Okay. So all communities, regardless of digital or we'll call it um, our reality, because reality is unthreatening before our eyes lately. um, our reality versus the online realities. You're always going to have assholes in the group, right? There's always going to be those one or two. It's usually a dude that's just being a jerk and doing shit that they maybe. I hate the word should. That's so judgy, but I think I have to use that there. They've injected themselves. Maybe it's because you said earlier they get the rocks off by being shitheads, or they get into these groups with unprocessed trauma and lash out. How does a online community keep itself safe for the users at large?
Yeah, and we talk about like in bars we have that security, that bouncer, that hey,
Right.
you're cut off, you got to go home, but you can come back tomorrow, or like hey, maybe you should give yourself a few weeks or a few months before you get back, or hey, this dude's 86, he's no longer allowed back in this bar because he's going to be a problem.
Right.
Um, we talk about like there's a big parallel about if you let one neo-Nazi in your bar, you suddenly have a neo-Nazi bar because they're going to take it over, and you have to have a zero tolerance policy on that. And a lot
Yeah.
of that is we're going to talk about two terms: gatekeeping and the
Hmm.
tolerance paradox. Now,
Okay.
gatekeeping can be kind of a negative term, especially in nerd culture, and it's basically you have the hardcore fans that were lifetime fans. They gatekeep the newer fans or the casual fans. It's like you're not a real fan, and that is kind of toxic, and I don't like that. I used to have a friend that was kind of like that, and it always kind of like I always gave him shit. He's like, "Oh, you like the Matrix? Do you even know who John Woo is?" Like, no, they don't. But this is your opportunity to introduce them to that. Like, why are you making it a negative when this could be a positive? And then you have positive gatekeeping, which is if any community, if you want to create a safe space, you need to make unsafe people not welcome. And that's where we get into the tolerance paradox, where to have a tolerant society, you cannot tolerate intolerance. And I'm going to give you two great digital examples of that, both having to do with racism, homophobia, and other hate. The Kind of Funny community had a kind of a falling out with one of their founders, who they left amicably, sold their shares, the whole thing. He has his own thing, everything's fine. But later in 2017, the Kind of Funny team decided to do something, and they basically told their community, "Hey, this is not about politics. I'm going to be clear, we're not talking politics right now, but MAGA is a hate group, and we don't want you in our community. We're sorry." And a lot of people got offended, and they were Kind of Funny fans that said like, "Oh, you don't like Republicans, you're not going to let," like, they're like, whoa, we didn't use that word. We don't care about what you think about tax policy or immigration policy or universal health care. We can have different opinions and debate about that. What we're talking about is human rights, being kind and empathetic. And if you're not going to be kind and empathetic, get the fuck out of my community, and I don't want your money. Truth be told, we have plenty of warm, kind-hearted people that are willing to give their hard-earned cash to keep this community going, and we don't need your hate, because we don't want that. We want trans people to feel safe in our community. We want LGBTQ community. We want people of marginalized communities to feel safe and welcome. And if that means kicking you out the door digitally, we're fine. And that's why moderators and admins are so important in digital third places. These are community members that are volunteers, but they basically shut down those people. They mute them, they kick them out, things like that. They might even ban them. Another great streaming is there's a guy called Fightin' Cowboy. He does a lot of gaming streaming, specifically in Souls games like Dark Souls, Elden Ring, all that stuff. And just recently, he's had a couple rants. Just recently, he went on a massive rant about while he was playing Assassin's Creed Shadow, which has a historical figure, Yasuke, who's an Afro samurai, essentially. And there's a lot of like controversy. Was he really a samurai? Was he not? Who cares? And he had people in his chat talking crap because there was a black guy in the Japanese game. And he went on a massive rant and basically told these people, hey, get the F out. Get the F out. You are a racist, you are a POS, you're a bigot, and I don't want you here. And why are you even here? You don't like this game. You're just here to cause trouble. You're here to throw fists and then snicker about it. Get the F out. And that's how bars operate. When you have someone that keeps causing fights, you're not going to let them into your place. People forget that the code of hospitality, Xenia, is a social contract. It's a two-way street. As the host, yes, it's incumbent upon me to give you entertainment, food and water, and safety and security. But your side of the contract is to abide by my rules and be kind and don't be a dick. And if you're going to be a dick, go somewhere else. That was, I always joked that the first response to a bad Yelp review was the end of the Odyssey, when Odysseus came home, him, his son, his wife kicked all those assholes out by the tip of the spear. And you have to do that in a third space. Otherwise, again, it's about creating an inclusive, safe space. And sometimes inclusivity means telling people you are not welcomed because you are not following the golden rule.
Yeah. Don't be a dick, if anybody's wondering.
Don't be a dick.
Yeah. It's the most important rule of a third place, I think. And there's been many a time, I'm sure you've had to kick out people and give them either a suspension or maybe even lifelong bans where they're just not welcome. And I think we've
and in a hospitality professional, you want to take a negative experience and try to turn it into a positive experience. There's no bigger win than turning a hater into a fan, right? But there also, you need to have hard lines, and a lot of ownership doesn't understand that, and that hard line is safety. And you know what? I've had arguments with general managers before about a dude got a little handsy with a server. For me, that's a hard nope, get out. You know what? Don't even pay for your bill. That's on me. Get out. And
Yep.
some people are like, no, we'll diffuse the situation, yada, yada, yada. And I'm like, no. I
No.
love the idea that active bystander intervention has become a big popular thing in our industry, and now we have
Mhm.
training courses for it. It's whenever I run a program or consult, like I always want, if you're not gonna let someone come in to do it, I can do a class, even though I'm not an expert. I've been through classes, I have notes, and you need those hard rules to provide security for your guests.
Yep.
And yeah, sometimes when a line is drawn, I'm sorry, but like maybe this isn't your spot.
Yeah.
Maybe you don't want to be our fan. That's great. There's plenty of other places. And a lot of
Yeah.
times when people are being a problem, it's not about their situation, it's about something else they have going on.
Exactly.
And maybe if you're able to reach them and diffuse the situation and understand where they're coming from, maybe you can turn a negative situation into a positive situation. But yeah, sometimes you just got to say, it's not you, it's us. And maybe this is not your place.
Let me ask you this, because we are in a. I'm scratching my head for those of you that can't see us and pulling down my face with frustration, because I think you were probably part of this same group, but when the pandemic started, um, I saw an opportunity for hospitality to start to reset itself and to be more inclusive and to have better open spaces, better dialogue, so forth. And we went the exact opposite way, largely. And now we're reaping the benefits of that insofar as places are shutting down on a pretty decent clip. I'm not sure the industry understands it at a whole how fast places are shutting down. Like I think the percentage.
25% is optimistic um, percent of how many bars and restaurants will shut down by 2026. I don't think our industry realizes it. I don't think our communities realize it. I don't think they realize how bad 2024 was. I don't think they realize it's all the way from the top big boys, like international companies, all the way to mom and pop shops.
Yeah.
And everyone in 2024 was waiting for 2025, and 2025 is looking potentially worse. At the very least, it's more chaotic. And yeah,
Yeah.
our industry is in crisis. I also, to your point, I think a lot of the lessons we were supposed to learn during the pandemic, we immediately forgot as soon as the doors opened. We were able to go outside, and that really, really scares me. We lost a lot of mentorship. We lost a lot of leadership in our community because
Mhm.
people, rightly so, they were felt like I've been like breaking my body for a community that doesn't even respect me enough to make sure that I'm safe, right? It's not just about the long hours. It's not just about the shit pay. It's not just about the stress. Like, how many of us have had like, ulcers because of like what we do to ourselves to provide a third place for the community, and then to see society tell us, well, you don't matter. That was a hard pill to swallow for a lot of people, and we lost a lot of talent. But more importantly, we lost those stories and those lessons that those people were going to provide to the next generation. And the new generation, I feel, is very rudderless, and they're having to find their own way. A mutual friend of ours, Brandon Cummings, he works for Altamar Brands,
God,
and
I
he
love
recently
him.
had me be a judge. He's an amazing human being.
Yeah.
I need to thank him and his wife by making them dinner on a little double date situation, because he's saving my ass right now for an event. But he had me be a judge for a cocktail competition, which is really cool because right now I'm independent. I'm a Ronin. I'm a freelancer. So
Right.
to have someone that doesn't have a big brand attached to him or a big name attached to him, just his pedigree, was very important. But unlike most cocktail competitions, he gave me an opportunity to give feedback to the competitors, both the winner and the losers. To the point where like one guy asked me an email, and I gave one of the most professional emails I've ever sent in my life, with one of those what we call the compliment sandwiches, telling what he did good, where I felt he missed, what I felt he could do better, even down to how he told his story, and not trying to like, you didn't tell me a boring story, you just didn't excite me when you told it, right? You gave me a narrative. I wanted 500 days of summer, and he sent back a very heartfelt like thank you. That was really cool. I have one guy who he's only been bartending for 2.5 years, and he's only running his own program, and he was asking me like, I don't know how to be a good teacher. I don't know how to like train someone. And I told him, this might be a little curveball, but read Plato's Republic. Read about the Socratic method.
Mm.
learn how to lead someone to the answer as opposed to telling them what the answer is. There was one competitor that I straight up asked her, "Hey, have you done Diageo World Class?" She's like, "No," and she didn't win. I think she took second. I told her, "You should do Diageo World Class." Like straight up,
Yeah.
that was a Diageo World Class style presentation. I had another competitor. As soon as she was done, she made a couple mistakes. I'm like, "Hey, are you nervous?" She's like, "Yeah, a little bit." I'm like, "Hey, I know there's a competition, but you're behind a bar. We're just your guests. We ordered some drinks. You're making us your signature drink. You're having a conversation with us. We're asking your questions. How many times a night does that happen during a shift?" She's like, "A lot." It's like, it's no different. And I know you have butterflies. You're always going to have butterflies. But just remember, you're just bartending. And it was really cool to come out of that and feel like I was giving back to my community, and I was giving some feedback to help people be better, because that's the next generation of leaders and mentors and competitors and bar owners and bar managers, and it's important to cultivate that within our community.
I agree. Yeah, we did not learn our lessons, and I love the fact that you are actually taking the time, and I love that Brandon did he was the contest set up specifically to give feedback? Was that part of the model of the competition?
No, it's a Pro Ibitas competition, and the grand prize is the finalists will compete in the finals and at tails, and the winner
Okay.
of that gets to go to Barbados.
Oh,
And
nice. Okay.
that was very ad hoc. It was very last minute, where he asked me, and I was like, well, first of all, when he reached out to me, he wanted me to compete, and I'm like, do you want me to compete or do you want me to help? Like, because I've competed, I've gotten trips. Like, it's cool to get a free trip. It's cool to get a win and another notch on my belt. But also, what can I do to give back? And he had me be a
Yeah.
judge. And last minute, he's like, "Hey, do you want to give feedback?" And I'm like, "Dude, you know me. Everything I do is an open book. Like, I refuse to sign an NDA." You know, like, you can keep my cocktail design, but I'm going to teach other people how to make it.
Yeah.
And yeah, that was very, very last minute, but it was very, very cool.
Oh, I adore the fact that he put that ability to give feedback in. I've been doing, as you know, tons and tons of cocktail competitions, whether that's through World Class or other parties for numbers of years, and I can't think of a single one that gave on at the moment feedback. I mean, you get feedback when you do World Class, and you get feedback in some other ones post event. Like a couple weeks later, you might get some feedback on how you can improve for next year, but it's not very often that you see stuff like that. And I think that's a pretty cool thing. And kudos to you for being that kind and constructive with the feedback. I think people maybe should study the different types of feedback. And there goes that word "should" again. Because there's different types, and constructive typically has a less bias form towards it. And if there is a bias, it's usually in good heart, so that you are being shepherded in a way to get to whatever goal it is you're trying to achieve. And I do appreciate that about you.
Yeah, and a lot of that was trying to be like, you know what? This is what I think. This is what I would do. This is what I wouldn't have done. And I was always trying to frame it into like my personal experience, but also one that comes with, almost 20 years in this industry now at this point. Oh my God, I just did the math. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
05 was when I got my job at Buzzard Beach, third quarter. So yeah, 20 years. Oh my God, I'm old.
Yeah. Uh, yeah, I did my math the other day and I about shit myself. So I'm just gonna leave it alone. I was like, oh God. Okay. Um, we are facing some tough times ahead, and I'm sure that we'll see some of our friends lose some things, and we'll see some of our friends gain some things. The one constant is that this industry will continue on. It'll just be evolved from where it was, much like third space virtual rooms, third space taverns, third space coffee houses, especially in the countries that don't have alcohol, where alcohol is seen as harem. Um, the coffee houses and tea houses are very, very important. So it's still a consumption model, just different. Still community, just a little different. Maybe not as open with thought, but still coded as such when you're in those spaces. It's um, kind of freeing to see it in a non-alcohol format sometimes, like non-alcohol induced, like
I
this
mean, I
caffeine
always shout
induced.
out to Starbucks when I had
Yeah,
when I had my NA seminar about the history of NA third spaces. I don't really like much of Starbucks, but they essentially brought back cafe culture to the
yeah,
US. Not just the espresso drink, but the cafe as the NA third space in the 90s. And it's something that we hadn't had since the advent of fast food that killed the soda fountain and the ice cream parlor.
yeah,
So shout out to Starbucks for like creating the NA third place, and now it's coming back around. Now we have coffee shop bars where you can get a cocktail or a coffee, which
yeah.
I'm a big proponent of. Is mixed places where you can have non-alcoholic, you can have um, um, alcohol or non-alcohol, where you can have games to congregate over. A big believer in that.
All right, well let's talk about that then. The hybrid version. Do you see a hybrid version coming around? And how much do you think the influence, especially with this Zennial, the Generation Z crew, they love themselves some analog world, and I love that they love themselves. I walked into the opening music at the bar the other, I guess it was week before last, and the bartender I work with on Wednesdays and Thursdays had on like Radiohead and Nirvana, and it was like walking into my high school years. Um, and it was great. They love some analog world. So, how do you see the hybridization happening going forward?
Well, again, like in most things, we already had it, right? Um, Internet cafes were a thing in the 90s. And those
Yep.
were also kind of hybrid gaming spaces where instead of having a LAN party where all your friends bring their PCs at home and you connect them with an Ethernet cable and play online at a sleepover, you're going to a cafe, renting out a spot, and you're playing games together. You have the board game bars are a thing that are popping up now.
Mm-hmm.
Um, where it's a place where you can rent a board game or gather for your D&D group, but there's food and beverages. The arcade bars are coming back, and remember that arcades originally weren't video games. Arcades were a part of amusement parks and entertainment districts where they had games of chance. It
Yeah.
was only like later that they started putting these video games there, and then the term arcade became arcade cabinets. So we already have some of that doing it. If I were to do it, I would take a little bit of everything. If I were
Mm-hmm.
to create like a digital third place bar where it's still a place to congregate, maybe there'd be a stage for performance, theater, comedy, but maybe there's also instead of TVs where where you're showing sports, you're streaming actual plays, you're streaming gamers. If like for example, there's a big Critical Role community in your space, maybe you screen the first episode of their new season on the big
Mm.
TV. When it comes to what you're saying, analog, you have that N64, that Sega Dreamcast with the four controllers, and you're having Mario Kart competitions. Maybe you're doing some classes online on your venue's podcast where you're talking nerd stuff about alcohol, gaming. Maybe you're doing your own actual plays online with your staff or with the community, like members of the of your regulars, game nights. And there's a way to hybridize everything and take
Mm.
from your inspirations and try to create something that's a workable business model, because in the end that's what you're trying to do is create. Third places are also largely businesses that need to
Mm-hmm.
generate enough profit to cover your overhead and maybe put a little bit aside to expand in the future or reinvest. I think a
Mm-hmm.
lot of entrepreneurs in our space don't really think about the business side a lot. Like a lot of times, if I'm talking to a bartender, I really don't care about talking about recipes. I want to talk to them about inventory and cost analysis, because if they don't know how to have that conversation, I don't think they should be running a bar. Because in the end, we have to pay our staff and we got to pay our bills. And to the point where, like, my first big boy bar manager job, I went out and I bought a book about on-premise bar management, and it was on the recommended reading list of the Bar 5 Day book, and it's my
Yeah.
Bible when it comes to. It's the book that taught me to put NA drinks on a separate category from food, so I can track my NA sales and not have to dig through all of my kitchen sales,
Yeah.
which annoyed my boss. But when he realized, oh, I just put the food tax, I don't care. You gave me an extra step, Arturo. I'm not annoyed. But then when I showed him the increase month to month in sales with our non-alcoholic drinks, versus sodas, he was very happy that I did that.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, no, I've thought about like how to incorporate digital places within. That's one of my biggest regrets from the restaurant at 1900 before I left. That I wish I would have invested more during the pandemic when it came to streaming, because we did a couple like digital tastings, and I would bring in a brand ambassador, and we would go through a guided tasting. It was me, a brand ambassador, and Doug Frost. I don't know if people realize how cool that would be to have an in-person tasting or a digital tasting with the Doug Frost. But in hindsight, I wish I would have done more streams. I wish I would have convinced the chef to do online cooking classes. I wish I would have done cocktail hours online. I wish I would have done classes online, whether it's spirits education, wine education, tastings, cocktail classes. That was, like I said, one of my biggest regrets, and I wish more people were doing that. I think you are going to see that a little bit, because a lot of venues are trying to look at non-traditional avenues for profiting. So I'm seeing restaurants and bars do subscription services, like beyond just a wine club or whiskey locker, where you pay a monthly fee and you get like different access, different meal sets, classes and things. I think you're going to be seeing a lot of that. You're going to see a lot of restaurants looking back at what they did in the pandemic when it comes to to-go drinks and their digital programming, and realize that that's a profit avenue that might supplement the fact that people don't have the income to go out as much, or kids aren't drinking as much, which every January I tell restaurateurs that they want to hit on January, like it affects our business, our drink sales are down. I'm like, have you considered providing alternate methods of sales, like non-alcoholic programs, and promoting it during Dry January? So those people they're still going out, they're just not drinking alcohol. And you give them a $12 cocktail that tastes delicious without the alcohol. And then the elephant in the room a lot of people aren't talking about is recreational drug use and legalization of marijuana, and how that's affected generational sales shifts. If a younger generation doesn't like to get blackout drunk and hungover, they also don't want to get spun out if they're hitting their THC vape or eating their CBD gummies. So they might have one or two alcoholic drinks, but they might supplement it with some non-alcoholic drinks. And if you don't have that option for them, they're not going to go to your place. When I first opened up a bar as the bar manager, and I was in charge of the bar program, I had an NA section. This was in 2009, 2010. And I would tell other bartenders, if you don't have a dedicated NA section in your program, you're leaving money on the table. Now I tell people, you're not leaving money on the table. You're watching money get up, walk out the door, and they might not come back. And the dive bars I see that are thriving late night are the ones that have NA options. The ones that used to bank on making their money from midnight to bar close by over serving people, they're not as busy right now, especially at 2 in the morning, 3 in the morning, and they're not noticing it, and they're blaming other things. And it's like, no, I'm 44. I can't stay out doing shots till 3 in the morning anymore.
No,
I
don't
physically
want to.
can't do it anymore, and I don't want to do that. That is not the lifestyle that I want. And the younger generation, they can, but they won't, for the most part. And they still drink, but they just have a different relationship with alcohol than we did, and boomers did, and Gen X had. And if you're not paying attention to sales shifts, if you're not paying attention to generational trends, you're going to get left behind in the dust. Unless you're a legacy venue, you have to reinvent yourself every 5 years, essentially, to stay hot, to stay on top of things. If you don't, you're going to close your doors. And that's the sad fact. But that's just my opinion.
Everything you said historically in context, I think, is spot on. And I think if you look at futures and you look at all the Nielsen data and you start to actually analyze the data, we're kind of exactly where you said. You need an NA section. I would argue that drinks have gotten unnecessarily too complicated for the average consumer, and that when we walk into spaces and we see things that we don't fully understand, we get freaked out. Like, I love complicated drinks. I'm a complicated person. I love going in and seeing things like nori washed vodka or gin with white miso and stuff like that on occasion. But I also want a place where I can get a good crusta, or I can get a Spanish coffee, or something that's a little more traditional, a little more, dare we say, grandparent style drinks, the martinis, the Manhattans, the old classics. I think that we get in our own ways at times and try to either oversimplify or overcomplicate our offerings to our guests. But hey, what do I know?
So you
I
know
only have
what
been doing
my
this for
personal
3
philosophy on
decades.
this is?
What's that?
So I think complicated is fine as long as it's in the front end. And you
Yeah,
can have the most intense molecular drink ever, but when you put it on your menu, just put the flavor profiles. I don't put
yeah.
brand names on my menus usually unless it's for an event, and I try to take all of the technical jargon out. That's why I love, like, I would probably never hang out at a spot like Sexy Fish because it's a little too, I don't want to say bougie, but it's kind of like that really nice high end cocktail club. But it's really fascinating because their cocktail program is about the beauty of simplicity and minimalism, and they're
Hmm.
really creating these high concept drinks, but the presentation, even though it's aesthetically beautiful, it's very minimalist, and the description is
Mm,
very minimalist, and they're creating these beautiful works of art, but they're presenting in a way that's way more approachable. For a place that's high concept to do that, that's amazing, and I think more
yeah.
people should learn that. Like, don't explain what a milk wash is. Like,
Mm.
you shouldn't have to. Um, I used to do a clarified Paloma with mezcal, and I just called it. I said it was inspired by Crystal Pepsi. I didn't tell them about agar. I didn't do
Yeah.
any like crazy science. So I just told them, oh yeah, it's like Crystal Pepsi but Palomas. And people were like, oh, I get that. I also
Yeah.
aged myself because only certain people of a certain age remember Crystal Pepsi.
Never
But
forget
yeah, I
Sammy
think
Hagar.
you gotta make things approachable to the consumer. And as
Yeah.
much as the cocktail geek wants to geek out with you, again, leave that stuff on the front end during service. It shouldn't even, unless they ask, it shouldn't even be part of the spiel.
I would agree. Well, folks, you've tuned into Tail Feather. You've been listening to us for a little bit over an hour. I hope that you've gained a lot of information on the digital third space and its relation to the traditional third place. So whether your third space is a front door or a follow button, one thing is clear: community is still out there. It's just got better lighting and sometimes more lag. Arturo, I want to thank you for coming on and hanging out with us today. I also want to ask you to go ahead and plug yourself, tell people where they can find you, which channels you're in, um, and how they can interact with you should you want them to. If not, that's also 100% A-OK.
Yeah, like I said, I'm kind of a mercenary bartender right now, so I don't have a physical third place home. But I'm Arturotron or Arturotron Robobartender on the socials. I don't typically stream on my own. I don't have the equipment for that. But you'll find me in the kind of funny Twitch chat. I am known for my terrible jokes. Neon Pocket Dimension is the crew I mostly stream games with. And then
Okay.
Upturned Table is the tabletop group that I'm a community member of, which actually I'll be doing an actual play, my first actual play. Talking about third place as a community. I was a lurker in this group for a while. I started watching them live, started engaging in the chat only a couple months ago. Got invited to the Discord. I become a core member, and they've asked me to be on one of their live actual plays.
That's
So
so
talking
cool.
about communities coming from digital third places. But yeah, I'm on. Sadly, I am in that hellscape Twitter. I refuse to call it the other word.
Yeah.
As Arturotron, I'm on Blue Sky. I avoid Threads because that place is also a hellscape. But I post on Facebook, so they pop up on Threads. And yeah, check me out on Blue Sky or on Neon Pocket Dimension or Upturned Table.
Right on. Well, my flock, my friends out there soaring around and wondering what the hell's next. Looks like we're going to have some hybridization coming our way. Thank you so much for joining today. We'll see you next time on Tail Feather. Take care and take care of each other.